So I think the interesting thing with respect to Indonesia is what everybody expected to happen, including in Indonesia, didn't happen. And that was everyone expected that Joko Widodo, Jokowi as he's known, who's the governor of Jakarta, would win a sizable chunk of the seats for PDIP, which is the party that platform that he runs on, in the parliamentary election, which just happened about 10 days ago. And that as a result, PDIP would go into the second round of elections, the presidential elections, with essentially in the kingmaker position. That didn't happen. They didn't get the 30% that they thought that they would get. In fact, they got less than 20. And so what that means is we have a real horse race in terms of who they will need to bring into coalition and who other parties in the race will need to bring into coalition. So there's a bit of coalition building going on. That's going to go on for the next few months. The other interesting thing that happened is two parties that weren't expected to do particularly well did better than they were expected to do. One is the current ruling party, Party Democrat, which is the party of the president. It's been going through a number of political corruption scandals over the last 18 months, which everybody thought would really dent the popularity. In fact, they got almost 10% or around 10% of the vote, which was actually much better than people thought. The other party that did particularly well is PKB, which is one of the Islamist parties, founded by Gus Dur, who was a previous president and also the head of one of the major Islamic associations in Indonesia. So that party also did much better than people thought, close to 10%. So you have two parties, relatively small parties, that did much better, and one of the larger parties that didn't do as well as everybody thought, and so everybody's gone into a sense of kind of a phase of political horse trading now. Whatever happens, you're going to have a coalition government, probably with 4 to 5 parties in coalition, in the ruling coalition, which means it's messy. That's what Indonesia has been for the last 2 terms of President Yudhoyono SBY. We've had a coalition. His party is not necessarily any larger than any of the others, so they rule by consensus. And that's challenging from a business perspective, because what you tend to have is a lot of policy change or benefits thrown to one particular political group in the coalition because they're responsible, for example, for that ministry or that sector of the economy. So there's been a lot of kind of surprise announcements. Terms of, let's say, contracts, particularly in the extractive sector, that are revised retroactively, new rules brought in on things like business franchises, on plantation ownership, on minerals, etc., that are more, let's say, nationalistic, broadly speaking, in economic terms. So that always gives business, particularly new potential investors, pause when things change, kind of from their perspective, halfway through the game. And the fact is that Indonesia is a big, messy democracy. And when you have coalition government, that makes it even more so. And so those levels of transparency and predictability are often not there. And that's what provides a lot of challenge for business expansion or new business going into Indonesia, is that type of guaranteed commitment that you've come in under this regime, and 2 years from now that regime will still be the same. I think a lot of the businesses that we talk to, they don't have that assurance yet that that's going to be the case going forward for Indonesia. So the most likely outcome probably still is that Jokowi will be the president in coalition with several other parties. That means he'll probably have a vice president from another party. His track record as governor of Jakarta, and before that he was mayor of a town in central Java called Solo, which is small by Indonesian standards, but not small by other global standards. And he comes from a small business background, so he was a small businessman. He was a furniture manufacturer and exporter to begin with. But his style and his whole platform is kind of a direct, to the people, grassroots type of leadership. So cutting through the bureaucracy, cutting through the politics, and just making practical improvements. So whether it's dredging canals or getting a road built, and also an emphasis, which is very useful in an environment like Indonesia, on clean government. So he will put a lot of his meetings, for example, on YouTube that he has with his departments underneath him, so that everybody can see what's being talked about. So the emphasis on transparency, on clean government is good. The emphasis on practicalities is good. But this is someone who is not tested yet at the national level. He's not held a national post. So there's definitely a learning curve there. Part of that, of course, can be helped by the vice president and also by the cabinet that supports him. But again, instead of PDIP being in the lead role to choose those positions, if they garnered a bigger share of the vote, right now they will have to negotiate those positions with their other coalition partners. So what we would expect to see, other things being equal, if it is a Jokowi presidency, it's a PDIP presidency, is an emphasis on problem solving, which is good, an emphasis on clean government, which is good for Indonesia, an emphasis on more education and basic support to the average everyday person in Indonesia, whether that's education, healthcare. Indonesia is probably one of the first, maybe the only big emerging market that introduced universal healthcare, and they did that just at the beginning of this year for everyone in the country. So that's a good thing, and it's a process that he would probably continue going forward. Having said that, PDIP is essentially the party originally of President Sukarno. It's run still by his daughter, Megawati. She is the personality around which that party revolves. That party has members who have certain business interests, like all of the parties in Indonesia. So I don't think we can avoid the fact that there are going to be some sectors that will get special treatment, if you will, because of who will be in power, because of who will be in the coalition. This is particularly probably true in the resource-intensive sectors, whether it's plantations or minerals. These type of things tend to have the most involvement from local business groups, real estate, these types of things. So definitely there will be, I think that those sectors provide a more challenging environment for foreign investors because they are heavily politicized and typically dominated by local business groups, as compared to, let's say, manufacturing in the broadest sense, or manufacturing for export, which tend to be, where you tend to have more foreign players and that they're less concentrated in the hands of local business groups.